Start. So welcome everyone. My name is Gregory Gale. I am the Director of Recruitment and Admissions. And as I said earlier, we have a wonderful session planned for you. Again, before we start, there are a few things I want you to remember. This session will be an hour long. We're also going to be recording this webinar, and the recording will be uploaded to our website within the next 2 weeks. So you'll have the opportunity of watching this or sharing it with your colleagues. Concerning the format, I will be introducing our presenter, and at the end of the session, she will be answering your questions. Afterwards, I will be presenting on the admissions and financial aid process. You should also know that in the materials section on your control panel, both of our presentations or PowerPoints will be available for you. So if you'd like, you may actually download that presentation at another time. And if you'd like to actually ask questions, what we'd like you to do is actually to use the control panel to actually ask us questions. So just one moment. Bear with me, we're just having a little technical issue here. I apologize. Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So I'm happy to introduce to you our presenter, Dr. Janine Morris. She's a professor at Nova Southeastern University. She works in the Department of Writing and Communication in the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Her research interests include digital and multimodal writing, reading and literacy studies, rhetorical history and composition pedagogy, and women, gender, and sexuality studies. Her doctoral dissertation studied the ways students use digital devices to read. She's presented at numerous national and international conferences, and her scholarship has appeared in journals such as College English Association Critic, Pedagogy, Computers and Composition, Composition Studies, and Community Literacy Journal. So I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Janine Morris. Dr. Morris.
Thank you so much for being here this afternoon with us. Just give me 1 second to, all right. As Greg mentioned, I am an assistant professor in the Writing and Communication department here at Nova. And one of my roles in the department is to teach students, undergrad students, how to research. And often I've found in my classes that students really have a hard time when it comes to finding news articles and knowing how to use them. So students often don't know where to find information about the author, about where the journal or news article comes from, and whether or not it's a reliable source. So that's one of my interests on this topic. And then another of my interests comes from just being a social media user, being somebody who's been following the news recently and during the 2016 election, and just seeing the spread of misinformation and confusion that's come over the news. So today what we're going to be covering then is where fake news comes from and why it's a problem, how you can spot it, different techniques for checking and source checking information, and then we'll also talk about some strategies for how to talk to other people about the news that we read. So in 2016, we started to see an increase of interest over the term fake news. So if you look at this Google Trends aggregate here, up through the middle of June, we really don't see very much, no one's really looking at fake news. But then in the middle of 2016, we see sudden spikes. Searches for fake news often deal with uncertainty, and really there seems to be quite a bit of confusion wrapped up around what fake news is, what can be trusted, especially when we see politicians throwing around terms like fake news and alternative facts, accusations of news media being fake, and then different reports of fake news coming up.
If I could just interrupt, Dr. Morris, we're not able to see your slides.
Oh no. Okay.
And
I'm sorry, just give me one sec. Okay, is this better?
yes.
Excellent. Okay, so this is where I was on this Google Trends aggregate of fake news. So you can see in the middle of 2016, there's a jump in searches for fake news. And then you see that kind of grow early in 2017. And like I was saying, there's a lot of uncertainty wrapped up in this idea of fake news and being able to detect it. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to ask you to complete a couple different polls that have been used in different studies from the Pew Research Center to gauge people's reactions to different news. So the first poll I'm going to ask you to take, you should be able to see it in your control panel right now. There you go. So the poll is open, and so I'd like you to answer this following question about the poll. So made-up news has caused me a great deal of confusion, some confusion, or no confusion, or not much confusion at all. So this is a question that has been asked through a research study, and about 1,000 people responded to it. So I'm interested to see what our respondents here are saying. So if you could click one of these answers in the poll, that would be great. All right, so we have about an 80% response rate right now, so I'll stick with that. It looks like 75% of you have selected that you have some confusion over fake news, whereas 25% have said, no, not much confusion at all. If we look at the results from the Pew study, 64% of respondents said that they felt a great deal of confusion over this idea of fake news and about being able to judge the current events that they're reading. So this group here is a lot more confident in the fact that there's just some confusion rather than a great deal of confusion. But this is kind of what the numbers show. However, even though there's this growing concern around fake news, the idea of using propaganda to forward an idea, a belief, a political view is not new. Before fake news and alternative facts were in our lexicon, propaganda has always had a history of being used for political gain. For example, Octavian, who later rebranded himself as Augustus, used a flattering and youthful image of himself throughout the empire as he defeated Mark Antony. Mark Antony also, during that time, forwarded his own propaganda during the Civil War. The term propaganda itself didn't come into our lexicon until the 17th century. And propaganda originally referenced the Congregation of the Propaganda, a committee of cardinals responsible for foreign missions founded in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV. And then in the 1800s, you see the term more as we know it now, as a systematic dissemination of information, especially in a biased or misleading way. And in the 1800s, the term propaganda came up in reports like Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto and P.K. O'Cleary's History of the Italian Revolution. And the kind of propaganda that I think most people are familiar with is the kind of propaganda that came up during the 20th century, the kind of government-produced propaganda during periods of war. And so both of these images on your screen are propaganda images used during World War I. The one on your left of the people in the line was used to recruit British people to the war, and then the one on the right is Italian propaganda. Even though propaganda itself is a kind of fake news, what we see today and what I want to focus on today is more the kind of news that's produced in newspapers by citizens and is not the kind of larger government-controlled propaganda that we see in these examples here. But even fake news as it appears in newspapers is not new. In 1835, in August, the New York Sun posted a series of 6 articles describing life on the moon. So supposedly, these articles came from the Edinburgh Journal of Science, and they chronicled an actual astronomer, Sir John Herschel's, supposed revelations of the moon that he got from his telescope. So in these revelations, Herschel supposedly saw fantastic animals, unicorns, winged creatures, lush landscapes, amethyst crystals, and massive craters on the moon. And so this is a sketch of what supposedly was seen through his telescope. And following the story, the sales in the New York Sun went up. A lot of people were interested in following this newspaper. Researchers from Yale traveled to New York to try to see the original articles. Herschel received mail, people writing and asking him about his discoveries. All through this, people did not realize this was fake. In 1835, the New York Sun had to put out an article saying that, in September of that year, they put out an article saying, okay, actually this was false. And by 1835, when that article came out, the Edinburgh Journal of Science itself was completely out of print. The supposed author of the New York Sun's article was no such person. And so finally, authors that year admitted their hoax. And there are a number of other really fascinating examples of fake news that came out during the 19th century that if you're interested in this, you should definitely Google and try to find because they're really great. But for the purposes of our talk today, the kind of fake news I'm going to be focusing on is to find in a study by Alcott and Jensko that looked at fake news during the 2016 election, and their definition of fake news is that it's news articles that are intentionally and verifiably false and could mislead readers. So these are the kind of articles that we're going to be focusing on today. And these articles, wrapped up in these articles are ones that are intentionally fabricated news stories. And so those come from sources like you can see here, the Baltimore Gazette and the Denver Guardian. And these are stories that are made to appear as though they're real news articles, but and ones that are affiliated with a certain locale, so Baltimore or Denver, but these are clearly, they're fake and they have clickbait content. So the Baltimore Gazette, for instance, was actually a newspaper between 1865 and 1875. And the Denver Guardian was debunked by the actual Denver newspaper. So the Denver Post discredited the Denver Guardian and said, no, whatever story you see coming from the site is false. The definition of fake news from Alcott and Junsko also includes articles that are from satirical sites, but that could be read as truth if taken out of context, shared on social media, or if you're not familiar with the source. So a lot of people are familiar that the Onion's satire, but if you weren't sure if the Daily Current was satire, you might then go and share a story from their site unknowingly. What this definition is not covering, and these are all definitely types of fake news, but are beyond the scope of what we're looking at today, would be unintentional reporting mistakes, so when someone makes an error unintentionally, rumors, conspiracy theories, obvious satire like this Beaverton article about giving someone a bagel instead of an engagement ring, false statements by politicians, or true stories that are slanted or misleading. So what we're focusing on is just fake news articles that are intentionally and verifiably false. So before we talk about how to spot fake news when we see it, I want to talk a little bit about why right now especially this idea of fake news is a big problem. And so Alcott and Junsko in their research give us 4 reasons why fake news is an issue today. So one is that it's easy to make fake content and it's very lucrative. So for example, Cameron Harris is from Columbus, Ohio, and in 2016 he found the defunct domain Christian Times and bought it for $5. In 15 minutes he wrote an article about tens of thousands of Clinton voters or votes found stored in an Ohio warehouse. He Google searched an image of somebody with ballot boxes, put it together, posted it, shared it through different fake Facebook pages that he created himself, and from that made $5,000 off of the ad clicks that were generated from that site. And so in the interview with him, he said, even before I posted it, I knew it would take off. I've been reading a lot of features and interviews with people who wrote fake news, and a lot of them, also verified how lucrative it was. Some said that they would get between 5 cents per ad click to $6,000 a month. Other ones who are much more lucrative would make between $10,000 and $30,000 per month. And these are just individuals. This is not even considering the fake news factories that came out of Eastern Europe. These are just people in the US who found it lucrative to make this fake content. The second problem that Alcott and Junsko outline is that more people are using social media and it's easy to share fake news on that platform. In 2016, there were 1.8 billion active Facebook users per month, 400 million Twitter users per month. In a Pew study of how people get their news, 62% of respondents who use social media for their news, 62% of respondents use social media for their news. And so according to this study, 70% of Reddit users get their news from Reddit, 66% of Facebook users get their news from Facebook, and 59% of Twitter users get their news from Twitter. So people are using these websites to get their news. And so part of the problem with this is that a lot of times on these sites, the content is filtered for us. So algorithms create the content that we see, and we live in this almost filter bubble of information. So we get generated content based on things we like, things we're interested in, and so that's the kind of stuff we see. And so these filter bubbles create almost like an echo chamber where our views get confirmed and where we're more likely to see content that speaks to us. And so in terms of fake news, if you are supporting a certain candidate during the election and you see positive information about that candidate, you will see more of that because of these algorithms, and then because there's more information, you might be more likely to see fake information that you would be then inclined to share. The third reason they outline is that there's a tendency to distrust the mainstream news. And so in their research, Alcott and Jensko cite a Gallup study that looked from 1998 through 2014 to see how much people trust in the mainstream news. And so you can see from 1998 past 2014, there's a decline across the board. And then you really see a more sharp decline following 2014, especially amongst Republicans, but definitely overall. And so if people aren't trusting the news, then they're not going to be looking to mainstream media to get their news. So they're going to be looking for other sources. As people are looking for other sources, they're more inclined to fall into a confirmation bias, where people actively are seeking information that confirms their own view. So like this comic here, you want to find out the real truth on a topic, literally the first link you find agrees with what you believe. Got it, I believe it. So part of the problem, according to Daniel Levitin, who's a neuroscientist, who writes about statistics and how we can think critically about what we consume, that part of the problem is that we often make up our mind based on emotional considerations, and then we seek to justify them. And so we're always seeking unintentionally to confirm the views that we have already. So we think and judge with our emotions. We trust people that we know really without questioning their information. And because of that, we're likely to click on, read, and believe things that might not be true if they align with what we believe in already. And so the fourth problem that the Alcott and Jensko outline is the problem of political polarization. So today, our parties and our political affiliations are a really important part of our identity. So Sean Westwood, who's an assistant professor at Dartmouth, writes that in this era, we view party identity as something akin to gender, ethnicity, or race. It's a big part of who we are. So like the way we would seek out stories that confirm our views, we also seek out information that confirms our party affiliation. So we share stories as a way to show our support for our partisan team. So we want to be good team members, so we might be more likely to share news that supports what our team or our political party believes. So these four reasons are ones that, why for Jensko and Alcott, fake news is a concern and something that we should be worried about. And along with the polarization, we also see polarization across different news outlets. So this is another Pew Research graph, and the people who took this study identified themselves politically and then chose which news sources they're likely to read. And so people who took this, picked which sources they read on a regular basis. And so through this research, it showed that consistent conservatives often would cluster around a single news source. So 47% of the respondents chose Fox News as where they get their news for government and politics. Liberals, on the other hand, were less likely to be unified in their media search. So they would go to multiple sites, and that's why you see much more news sources over on this side, rather than sticking to just one news source. And so, there's a great deal of polarization, not only between people being able to talk to each other about their views, but also in the news that they read. So I have another poll for you to take. Given all of what I've said about how we are thinking about fake news, whose responsibility do you think it is to, deal with the problem of fake news? So who has the most responsibility? And so I invite you to answer this poll here in your dashboard. So do you think that social networking sites have the great deal of responsibility, the public, the government, or all three, or none of these people? So I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer this. So 100% of our respondents have answered. So 80% think that the responsibility is shared between the three. 20% put the pressure on social networking sites. Then how about who has the least responsibility? So of the groups, do you think that there's any of these that should be less responsible? Or do you think that we're all responsible, none of the above? So if you could answer this poll, that would be wonderful. All right, so it looks like 20% said that members of the public should be least responsible, and then 80% said that none of the above were all responsible for dealing with this problem. So in Pew Research, also looking at the same topic, the respondents shared a similar view to all of you here. So the responsibility was shared between members of the public, government, and elected officials, and social networking and media sites. So like you, it was distributed amongst all three, with the least amount of responsibility evenly shared. However, one of the things that we can control, so whereas we can't really, we have less control over the government and social networking sites on an individual level, one of the things we can control is what we can do to become better and more critical readers. And kind of frustratingly, so Justin Kohler, who created the Denver Guardian, National Report, usatoday.com.co, and washingtonpost.com.co, these are all fake news sites, and he is one of the people who made between $10,000 and $30,000 a month during the election cycle. He says that this has to fall on the readers themselves. So the consumers have to be better at identifying this stuff. We have a whole nation of media illiterate people. Really, there needs to be something done, says the guy who is profiting greatly from people not being able to read and understand the news he's sharing. So Google and Facebook have started removing fake content, allowing you to flag it, blocking ads. However, we do have to be the ones to be better at recognizing and judging our news. So last poll I'm going to ask you to take is how confident do you feel in your ability to recognize fake news? So when you see fake news, how confident are you that you can see it and judge it? All right, so 40% of you feel very confident, 20% of you feel somewhat confident, and 40% feel not very confident at all. So I would say that those are pretty generous results. In another Pew study, 45% said that, 45% said somewhat confident, 39% said very confident, which means that 3/4 of the respondents feel that they are at least somewhat confident in judging fake news. But seeing how much fake news there is out there and how fast that spreads, I would sort of disagree with some of the confidence that's expressed here. But what I want to spend the next few minutes talking to you about are some actual tips and things you can try to be better at judging the news you see. And so one way that you can do that is to start thinking more like a fact checker. Look at specific claims, look at sources, see in your research whether what you find matches, refutes, or proves the claim being made. Look at limitations of data and take all of that together and aggregate what you're saying. So in order to kind of break this down a bit more, Alexios Menzarlis, who is an international fact checker at the fact checking network at Poynter, has developed a list of 5 kind of tips for checking the news. So the first one is pay attention to the domain and the URL. So domains have restrictions which will help you identify their credibility. So .edu is for nonprofit education, .gov is for government, .com is commerce. When you should start seeing suspect is when you see extensions like .co. And then .net has less restrictions than the other ones, and then platforms that are like .wordpress, .blogspot, .blogger, those are all people's personal blogs and also should be a bit more suspect. But you can see, so ABC News is an actual news site, whereas abcnews.com.co is a fake news site that's made to look similar to ABC News. So you can see that it has different categories at the top, but the actual ABC News is much more professional looking. So if you start by paying attention to the URL, that's kind of your first dive into checking where your sources are coming from. The second thing that you should be doing is reading the About section of the source. So if you see here, this is from the New York Times. They have a whole website that's dedicated to their About section. On the right here, this is from the actual abc.com, and you see they too have a bunch of links that will bring you to different facets of their information about them, about their funding, their terms of use, their privacy. So an About section on a website should be straightforward, and it should have information about the site and its creator, its leaders. You should also pay attention when you're looking at these sections for disclaimers that the news site is satirical or fake, because some of them now will go outright and tell you that. You also will want to pay attention for sensational words in the About section. So in the About section for abcnews.com.co, I'm not going to read it all to you, but just know that there are words in there like devil's playground, die in a fire, and self-rape. So these are all clues that this is probably not a website that is presenting you the most accurate and factual news. 3 and 4 I'm going to put together. So you want to look at the quotes in the story, who's saying the quotes, you want to search the images, and you want to look at who the writer is. So these things are all wrapped up together. Accurate stories will use multiple sources. You'll have live links to the original material. So if somebody is referencing a study, there should be a link back to that study. People should be citing authors who have expertise on a topic. And so something to keep in mind with this is that expertise is narrow and it's specialized. So just because someone's a family doctor doesn't mean they're an expert on medical statistics or on pathology. You know, so even if somebody is a doctor, it doesn't mean they're a specialist in everything. So for example, there was an article that came out on the World Daily News that said a morgue employee was cremated by mistake while taking a nap. This article featured 2 images, so one of the deceased and one of a coworker, no live links, and then quotes, but no links to where those quotes came from. So a lot of reasons why this should be suspect right away. So if we start by looking at the images and going back to the source of the images, which you can do by right-clicking on them and Google searching them, you'll see that the deceased is actually a DeSoto County constable who was arrested in 2015 for a DUI. And the picture of the coworker is actually of a forensic pathologist from a 2012 article. So just looking at these images, you can already start to crack the credibility of a story like this. So when you're looking at articles, you know, go back and look at the image, see if it's a stock image, look at the credibility of the author. If you're not sure, use sites like Snopes or PolitiFact to go back and search and try to find where that information has come from. Lastly, you'll want to check the content itself. So look for sensationalism, that the title and the content match each other, and that there are no grammar and spelling mistakes. Because accurate and accurate journalists will double check their work. Other people hopefully will be looking at it. So you want to just check for things like that. In 2016, there was a story that came out that said scientists say giant asteroid could hit Earth next week, causing mass devastation. This article I saw appear multiple times, shared by different people on my social media, with very concerned thoughts about what is going to happen. However, if you actually took the time to read the article, you would see that after maybe a few sentences about the end of the world, the writer says, nah, totally messing with you. There's no asteroid, at least not about to strike next week. But there is a new study saying that 59% of links shared on social media have never actually been clicked. So this is just an example of an obvious kind of clickbait article meant to get people to share without reading, but that shows that oftentimes people share stories without actually reading them. So remember, before you click and share an article, take the time to go through it and read it. So beyond these couple of strategies that you can use to check articles, there are some amazing fact-checking resources that you can use to share or search articles that you're not sure of. So Snopes, PolitiFact, and FactCheck, these three sites do background checks on different articles and will rate them based on their accuracy. So whether they're fake, false, or true, these are great sites to use to double check these things. And so they each have a bit of a different slant. So Snopes originally started by looking at urban legends, and then now looks at all of these kind of like sensational news stories as well as political stories, whereas PolitiFact and FactChecker are definitely more politics-based. But all three of these stories are part of the International Fact-Checking Network that has standards met for fact-checking, like they're bipartisan, they are transparent with their sources, methods, funding, etc. A couple other really great resources that I'd be happy to share with people too. Melissa Zimdars created a Google Doc that's a live compilation of fake news sites. So she lists the site, what type it is, whether it's bias, conspiracy, and she also has some resources for teachers too on the site. So this is a good site to visit, as is the News Literacy Project's 10 Questions for Fake News Detection. This site, this handout offers a series of questions that you can ask yourself as you're reading news sources to judge whether or not they're real or fake. And then finally, for some longer reading, Daniel Levitin's Weaponized Lies, How to Think Critically in the Post-Truth Era, talks about the ways that statistics can be used to manipulate people, and that the way that words and expertise can be used to manipulate people. So if you're interested in learning more, his look through this book is really great. So the point that I want to end on with you today is just by offering you a couple strategies for navigating political conversations and hard conversations about the news. So research shows that people, like I said, want to hear views that align with their thinking, and there's a tendency to disengage from conversations that are hard. So Harvard Business Review surveyed 1,866 voters in 2016, and 81% of them said they avoid political discussions at all costs. And that's not good. If we're going to help decrease the partisanship that we're seeing and kind of try to erode some of the stuff about fake news, we have to be willing to talk to each other. So a couple tips that you might use if next time you're in a conversation with people who you have different political leanings with are, firstly, think of it as a learning opportunity. So you are not going to change, there's a good chance you will not change someone's mind. Once our minds are made up, they're really very hard to change. Instead, look at the conversation as a chance to learn. Be curious, have an open mind, and try to find out why someone might hold that perspective. Secondly, ask for permission. So ask for permission before you start on a subject, and also to share your opinion, because maybe because you want to have a conversation doesn't necessarily mean the other person will too. So ask for permission. And then show respect. That means both communicating respect by saying things like, I really respect your opinion. I want to hear what you think about this subject and actually listen. So communicate respect, but also show respect through your actions. Don't interrupt, don't talk over, don't discount ideas or call people names. Demonstrate respect, and hopefully you'll be shown that in return. Look for common ground. And so that can be easier said than done, but if you can look for things that you agree on, you at least have a place to start in the conversation. And then don't pretend to know things that you don't know. It's okay to admit that you want to look at something in more depth, that you need time to research it, and that you'll get back to a topic at another point. And lastly, if you see fake news, call it out. Do not just let it go. Stop the spread of fake news by saying something about it. So I'm going to end on this quote from Obama's farewell address. As he's saying that our democracy becomes weaker when we allow the political dialogue to be so corrosive that people don't want to listen to each other. So we don't want that, so please try to use some of these strategies and be open to having conversations with people who have different views from your own. So, I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking with you and answering some of the questions that you might have.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Morris. That was very informative. And we do have a series of questions to ask you.
Okay.
The first question is, does someone's level of education have anything to do with how they source the news or how they understand or comprehend the news?
That's a really good question. And actually, more than level of education, what I found through this research is that it's political affiliation. That people who created fake news sites, some of them said that they did it initially to try to show how gullible people were. And they found that, in creating both pro-Trump and pro-Hillary websites, that, people who were more in favor of Trump were more likely to share positive information about him and negative information about Hillary compared to people who were pro-Hillary that just didn't follow the positive stuff about her or the negative stuff about Trump so much. But I think that more than education and more than that, the problem has to do with just being familiar with how sourcing works, with how citations work, that if you're not familiar with, like, oh, somebody should be linking back to the original study, then you wouldn't think to look for that. So I think that that's part of it, is knowing how to look at the news, and then also being open-minded, because if you're just going to shut out anything negative and not be willing to be open to alternative views, I think it's easier to kind of get in that filter bubble.
Mm-hmm. So how do we report fake news?
So Facebook now has a function where you can dispute the news. So if you're on Facebook and you see a story, when you click on I guess the right-click function at the top that you can do to kind of expand your options with the story, I think that you can say that this is a disputed source, and then they will look at it and take it down. So that's one way that you can do it. Also, going through, like, reporting stories to Snopes or PolitiFact and have them look into it is another way that you can kind of work against that on those platforms.
So can fake news publishers be sued for using pictures essentially that do not belong to them, as you demonstrated in the slides?
I imagine that they probably could get, like, cease and desist letters for doing that. I know that people sharing images online is definitely a big problem because people don't think of copyright, and people don't think that the images they share belongs to someone else. In creating this presentation, I was very conscious that, the clip art I chose was all Creative Commons, so anybody could take it and use it. So I guess you could be asked to remove it, but a lot of the fake news screenshots and stuff I found weren't actually, those sites aren't active anymore. So once people get called out on it, they take it down. And so a lot of what I found was looking for screenshots, and then through Snopes or PolitiFact that had screenshots from the original article. So I don't know, I think people will probably be more likely to get warned and take it down right away.
So do you think that fake news is a bigger problem in the United States versus Canada or Europe or elsewhere in the world?
That's a really good question, and I think that's something that I would be interested in looking at more. In doing this research, I've seen that there's a lot of fake news that has come out of Europe meant to target people in North America, and not just about politics. So there are people who are creating fake sites based on health information, and a lot of people who are doing this will just copy existing websites, create a different title, different link, different page, and reshare it and generate ad content that way. So I think that like the fake news isn't just looking at political news, but I think it's kind of extending into other realms as well. But I'm sure that it's something that is happening everywhere. And the asteroid article that I posted, people I know who are Canadian and American, everyone shared that. Like, I think especially since our social media is so borderless, that it's not something that's limited within a certain country.
What attracted you to this topic?
Well, like I said, my students are part of the reason why I was really compelled by this topic, and just helping them become more critical media users is an important goal of mine as a professor. And so I find that fascinating. And also, as somebody who studies digital reading, I'm really interested in how we are consuming information through digital mediums, and this sort of falls into that.
Perfect. Okay. One final question. Do the fake news producers make any money? I think you've answered that. Or are they just pranksters?
I think some people do start out that way, like Justin, I'm forgetting his last name right now, Justin Collar, I believe, who is the one that I quoted saying that people need to be better media readers. He started out writing fake news just to see who would fall for it, like just to trick people, but then he ended up making so much money that he thought this is really lucrative. Similarly, there's a big feature story about people, this man in Macedonia who's writing fake news, who said that he ran into someone he knew who had a BMW and was like, how did you get this? I want to do this. And so started following this guy and creating fake news content so he could make money. So I think that it is really lucrative, and I think that's probably what draws a lot of people to it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. We're going to transition into the admissions and financial aid segment, but Dr. Morris will still be available to answer questions at the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Morris.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
So, well, I'm just going to briefly talk about the application and enrollment process. If you are interested in our master's degree in college student, in CRDM, which we call Composition, Rhetoric, and Digital Media. The process requires that you complete our online application, which takes around 30 minutes to complete. Essentially, we'll be asking you for information so that our committee will make a decision. There's an application fee of $50 that you would submit at the end of the process. We will ask that you submit your academic transcripts to show that you've earned a bachelor's degree or any other degree. You may actually send your degree or have the registrar at your school send your degree, but you can also have it emailed to us. As part of the application process, we would like you to submit a personal statement, which is really a way for you to tell us your intent. why you are interested in this particular degree. We'd also like you to submit a writing sample. You can either submit an academic paper or professional paper or just a personal essay explaining why, showing your you have the ability to write at a graduate school level. We'd like you to submit 2 letters of recommendation. These should be from individuals who can attest to your ability to be in graduate studies. Generally, this means someone from an academic background or an individual such as a supervisor. We allow students to enroll in our program 3 times throughout the year. We have a fall semester, a winter or spring semester, and a summer semester. You'll notice on your screen we have deadline dates, and what that means is you must submit all the required documents on or before those deadline dates. For international students, these are students who are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents, we have a slightly different process for you, which means that you'll work with our International Student and Scholars Office. As I said, you will have the registrar's office mail your transcript to us, but we also provide the opportunity to have your transcripts sent to us electronically. Another wonderful part of our curriculum is that we offer graduate assistantships for students. And what we'd like you to do is to contact us as part of the beginning of the enrollment process so we can provide you additional information. But this is a wonderful way for you to complete a graduate program by having part of your cost of enrollment covered. For more information about this process, you may either call us or send us an email, and we'll be happy to answer your question. Another part of the enrollment process is the ability to pay for your education. And we have a team of individuals at our university in our Office of Student Financial Assistance who are able to help you through this process. And so what you're going to see are some screenshots from their website. So we do offer scholarships for students, for graduate students enrolling within our college. They can be institutional scholarships. These are scholarships that are housed on our campus, as well as external scholarships. And again, we have a team of individuals to help you to find the scholarships that will match your academic need. We also provide information on loans for students, and many students use this option to finance their education. If you happen to be in a veteran status, again, we have a team of individuals to help you enroll, to have you fill out the appropriate forms for your veterans benefits. We also hire students on campus. I've spoken to you about our graduate assistantships, but we also hire graduate students to work as work studies on campus. And so again, we provide you with information on that on the website. For some students, they're interested in having a payment plan, and so we also work with you to devise a plan that will help you to pay for your education. The first step, though, starts with you getting the free, the Federal Student Aid ID, and then to complete the free application for Federal Student Aid. And if you have any questions about this process, again, you have the ability of coming on campus and sitting down and meeting with one of our financial aid advisors. You may call us, send us an email, or you can visit us online. So with that said, let me see if you have any other questions concerning this topic. So Dr. Morris, a question is, how exactly do fake news producers make money?
Most of them make money through ads. So a lot of them will just register with something like AdSense through Google, and so that will populate the site with ads. And so anytime anyone clicks on the site and clicks on the ad, that's how people make money. So the more a story is shared, then maybe more likely people will be to click on the ads, and then the people make money that way. And so in one of the people who were featured, their complaint was that so Google has now stopped generating these ads if a site is reported as fake, so it'll take the ads away from you, the ad money, and people didn't get paid. So people felt that they should have got money when they didn't because Google refused to pay them.
And Dr. Morris, would you mind telling us about some of the actual classes that you teach within the curriculum?
Sure. So our curriculum takes place, our classes take place in the evening. A lot of our students have full-time jobs and are coming in after work. So we have classes in the evening during the week. And then we also have a couple online classes. Online writing is one of our focuses, so we have an online class for that. But the classes that we teach emphasize digital media writing, digital media production, as well as composition, which is the teaching of writing, and rhetoric, so rhetorical history, rhetorical criticism, research methods. So the program is well suited for people who want to further their skills, who are employed already and are doing work you know, in the editing field, in publishing, in digital media already, or communications, as well as people who want to go into a PhD program. So our program will put you in a good position once you're done to apply and get into PhD programs as well.
So we do have a question. Does this program also cover telehealth? So the ability, I'm assuming, to write for in a technical field or present information in a technical field.
We do have classes on technical writing, so that is part of what the program emphasizes. It's not a professional writing degree, but we do have professors who teach technical, professional, business writing, so there are classes in that area. So if you're in that field, this would be a good program for you as well.
Perfect. So we are now at the 6 o'clock hour, and I want to thank everyone for participating in this session. Dr. Morris's information is on your screen. So if you do have questions afterwards, please feel free to contact her directly. Again, this was a recorded session, or is a recorded session, so we will be uploading it to our website within the next 2 weeks. So thank you everyone for participating, and we look forward to presenting another topic very soon.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everyone.